No, it's on. All right. The back groups. Here's what we have been working on, or the end goal, something along this. And if you look at your blend file right now, you'll notice that we've got quite a ways to go. But we don't actually have as far to go as you might think. Here we can see we've got the walls in, we've got the carpet in, we've got a bunch of other random trinkets. And that's another thing about the backrooms as a concept. It gives you the ability as an artist to just kind of put whatever you want in there, because the very definition of creepypasta is that there's no real canon. So, like, yeah, there'd be a horse statue in the backrooms. Why not? But we're still missing a crucial step here, and that's the lighting. And you may look at this and say the lighting looks really flat, there isn't much lighting to do here. You're wrong. The flattest lighting in CG is actually sometimes the hardest to get right. So let's get started with that. So let's go ahead and again create a new file, just to practice lighting. And this time, delete the cube and go ahead and Shift-A, add a UV sphere. And you'll notice that this looks really not like a sphere. And the reason for that is because of the shading. Remember how I said everything was made up of polygons? Well, that becomes painfully obvious when we start working with rounded surfaces. We can see that's not a curve, that's a bunch of squares that make up a circle. But there are tricks we can use to hide this fact, to hide the fact that everything here is made up of polygons. So we're going to start with the most obvious thing, which is smooth shading. So if you right-click on an object and click Shade Smooth, it will do a whole bunch of rendering magic to essentially look like it's a curved surface. But if you zoom in on it, you'll notice it still looks very high poly. Now it looks like a 2004 Wii game in how high resolution it is. So we actually need to increase the amount of polygons that are in the sphere, because if we go back into wireframe mode, we can still see there are still a very low amount of polygons. So let's go back to our modifiers where we had added our bevel. We'll go ahead and click Add Modifier. And this time we're going to use a subdivision surface modifier. And if you unclick Optimal Display, you can actually see how many polygons it's adding.
Subdivision surface, you said?
Yes, subdivision surface. And what this is going to do is essentially subdivide our model and smooth it out. Now, this is a very powerful operation. It is also a very dangerous operation, because you subdivide the wrong thing, it can look totally wrong. And you don't have to follow me here, but I'm going to demonstrate what happens if you subdivide, say, a cylinder. Does that. I can increase that. And this just doesn't look very good. So yeah, subdivision, very powerful, yet very dangerous. Any kind of organic modeling, you're going to want to be using subdivisions. I don't personally do organic modeling because I find it scary, so, but it's there. So now we've got our sphere that we can practice our lighting on. So go ahead and this time click Rendered View. Did you manage to get the subdivision?
No, I didn't do any of that.
Well, if you unclick Optimal Display, you can actually see what it's doing.
Which one's optimal? Oh, okay.
Because what it does is if you have a subdiv modifier, and then you look at it in wireframe mode, by default it actually doesn't render those additional subdivisions, just to make it easier on the eye. And then unclick Optimal Display. So now we can see what it's doing. And remember how 2 days ago I went all about talking about how high resolution models might be able to crash your program? This is the modifier that is responsible for 90%. if you want, but we're going to move on with the class, not regarding how long it takes you to reboot. Now, let's go ahead and click into rendered views. This is the final of the 4 views, and we haven't covered it yet. And you'll notice that there's already a light in the scene up here, right? And this is going to be casting some light onto the sphere. So we can start moving this around, and we can see that it is lighting up the sphere appropriately. But problem is, this is not the final lighting. This would if we were rendering with the Eevee render engine, which is a real-time rendering engine, which is a lot more complex to use than Cycles. But instead, we're going to be using a path tracing engine. So go ahead up to your render properties, which is the top little camera icon, where the drop-down says Eevee next to render engine. Switch it to Cycles. For something as small as the sphere, it's not going to change much. Oh, and then one more thing, because I can't do this because I'm on a laptop that doesn't have a GPU, but next to device, you're going to want to click the camera, by the way, the camera at the top of the render, where it says render properties. There we go. Switch that to Cycles. And then next to device, where it says CPU, switch that to GPU compute. And now you'll notice that the viewport is significantly slower. And this is a very simple scene, but even so, it's kind of slower. But the light fall off and the way it interacts with the cube is already so much more realistic. And this is what we'll be using.
Yeah,
so,
it's more intense the closer I bring it.
I want to demonstrate something. So, if you want to come over here with the Movi, if I turn on my flashlight, there's this interesting property of light, which we sometimes use when shooting live action, but you have to be very aware of when you're trying to do CG. Say we've got this white reflective surface here, and it's still kind of light in here, so it's hard to see. But if I point my flashlight straight at it, and then I put my hand around it, we can see that even though my flashlight's not looking at my hand, it's still lighting up this part of my hand. And if I were to take, say, something that's a different color, and I thought the back of this would be green, it's not. If I were to take, say, this yellow note paper, I hope we're not leaking anything by Mike used to use this technique a lot. He would shine a light up against the ceiling and get a nice diffuse light. In Blender, we have to be very cognizant about replicating that. And that's what the Cycles render engine does, and that's why we're not using Eevee, because Eevee you have to take manual steps to replicate that. So let's go ahead and Shift A, and let's create a plane. And we'll scale it up a little bit. And you'll already notice that the sphere is starting to reflect a little bit of the plane. So let's go and into the material properties, create a material for the plane, and let's go and change the plane's color. And you'll notice that do you guys remember how to make a material? So it's the bottom material properties right there. That's the brush, I believe. Sorry, not the very bottom, but the bottom in this set with the little little circle. And I think you're still running the Eevee render engine. That doesn't look like Cycles.
I thought I didn't. No, I'm under Cycles, CG, GPU compute.
Oh, your light's just kind of far away, so it's hard to tell.
I was playing around with the position of the light. Yeah, I'm moving close.
But you'll notice if you change your base color of the plane, the sphere's reflection of it will also begin to change. And this is very dependent on the roughness. So if I go and I reduce the roughness of my sphere, it begins reflecting the plane a lot more. Or if I bring the roughness up, it reflects the plane about the same amount, but it's more distributed. I turn the roughness all the way down, we've got what's basically a mirror.
And we can turn our metallic up too.
Yeah, and you turn your metallic up, and now you literally do have a mirror. So my hand reflecting the light bouncing off of the paper is no different at its core than a mirror reflecting what you can see in the environment. But ultimately, a mirror is a lot smoother, so it's a lot easier to see what you can do with it than, say, a piece of paper or a hand. And we can tell that by fiddling around with these settings. Oh, we just accidentally created a mirror just by changing the values. This principle is the core of path-traced lighting. What do I mean by path-traced lighting? Well, the way that the rendering engine actually works is it basically just simulates a bunch of light rays bouncing around and, well, traces how those rays would move, where they would collide with, and uses that to approximate the behavior of light. So any lighting phenomenon that exists in real life should be present in the Cycles render engine. I've actually seen demos where someone put little cutouts in front of the camera. I forget what those are called.
Cucoloris?
Yeah. And then they had a light that was out of focus, and we saw the shape on the light, just like you would in real life, for that very reason. So how do we actually make this into a scene? That's what I'm going to show you now. So let's go ahead and first of all, adjust your sphere so that you can, your sphere's material so that you can actually see the light that's falling on it. And go ahead and make your plane white again, or a variation of white, like gray. And make your sphere a non-metallic color for now. So let's go ahead and delete the lamp. And you'll notice that the scene all of a sudden becomes very dull, which makes a lot of sense. There's no lights. And let's actually turn our background color all the way down to represent that. So go into the world properties up here, the little globe icon, and then turn your color all the way black so we have no light from ambience interacting with the scene. You're already in world properties, I think, so turn the color, click the actual gray box. It's the same color as the UI, so it can get confusing.
Okay.
But yeah, so now we have no light at all. Let's go ahead and add some light. So let's talk about the simplest type of light first, a point light. Shift-A, light, point. You'll notice nothing changes because your light spawned inside your sphere. So go ahead and move it out. And we've got a very dim light now. So at the bottom where the material properties used to be, now we get a little light icon that we can click in the properties panel. Go ahead and click that, and it's going to give you a whole bunch of controls as to what you can do with your light. So you can adjust the wattage of your light, turn it up and down. You can adjust the color that your light's going to emit. And then you can adjust the radius, which would be like applying a diffuser onto the light. It adjusts the sharpness of the shadows. You can also adjust the light type. So let's go ahead and set the light to spot. Now you'll see you have an approximation of a spotlight. So you can either drag this point around, or you can just use the standard rotation gizmo to rotate it around, and we can get a good spotlight on this. The spotlight gives us the radius as before, but it also gives us an additional option down here where we can set our cone radius, so how wide the spotlight's going to be, and how thick the edge of it is going to be. So if I turn my radius and that down, we get a very harsh spotlight. Well, what I had done was down here we have our beam shape. You can adjust that. You can turn the radius down or you can turn the blend down. Note your radius up here also has to be very low in order to get a harsh edge. And I see David has found the second to final light, which is an area light. So if we go ahead and set this light type to area, what this is going to do is apparently break on my computer. I'm not sure what happened now. Let me delete that and re-add it. Shift-A, light, area. Sometimes it might be better to delete the light and then add a new light of a certain type rather than changing the light type, because when you change it unexpectedly, it can break. And an area is essentially like you have an LED light. It basically emits a uniform amount of light over a given area, just like an LED would. And you get all the same controls. You can change the power, you can change the color of it. And a color would be like, changing the color has the same effect as putting a gel on the light. And then finally, there is the sunlight, which casts a uniform light, a very strong uniform light from one direction, infinitely far away. Generally, we are not going to use this. Instead, we are going to use HDR lighting, which I will get to in a second. So don't use the sunlight. Now, all of you have experience on film sets, right? And how to light for film sets. So go ahead and make use of that experience and try to light your sphere in a way that looks appealing. And add a camera if you need to and look through the camera view. There should already be a camera in this scene.
Cursor to silver, cursor to active. No, that's not what I'm going to put the cursor over here. Shift A, light.
And play with the materials as necessary as well. Let's get an award-winning shot of a sphere.
Is there a way to turn? Okay, actually, never mind. I figured it out. Alright. This light.
Oh, that got turned way up for some reason. I don't know why. Yeah, I'm not sure how that happened. Looking pretty good. Got your award, got your star of the night, the sphere. One thing I would recommend is turning up the radius just a little bit, because lights in real life are never infinitesimally small. You're never going to get that such a hard shadow. So I would turn up the radius just a tiny bit, get that little bit of softness in there. It's gonna go very far with your realism. And same thing with the roughness of the sphere. Barely anything is completely reflective unless it's like a mirror or something. Looking good. I see you've got your key light and then your fill light.
Yeah, well I want to be the backlight, so now I'm going to get my fill light over here. Oh wait,
so wouldn't you want to turn the power of your backlight up a lot so you get a nice rim?
Yeah.
That's what I generally do.
Let's turn it up. I just don't want to make it as strong. But let's see, maybe it's there. Radius.
For me, my backlight's actually usually the strongest.
Really?
Yeah, that's just a choice personally. You don't have to do that, but.
All right, let's see. And then this will do. I guess I can do another area light, right? Or is that too strong?
That's up to you. Area lights are the most realistic. An area light would be like if you lugged in an LED. So an area light is like an LED light is like you have an LED on a stand. A spotlight is, well, like a spotlight. And then a point light would be like a light bulb sitting without a shade. So they all have their various, I guess, approximations of what they would be in real life. So should we reconvene at 6:25?
No.
Cool.
For metallic, it's either 1 or 0, right?
Yeah, metallic is either 1 or 0. The only time there would be in between is when you're doing like actual texture work. But if you're just laying base materials, metallic's going to be 1 or 0. Get a good looking shot. Oh, little tip. You can actually, if you hold down Control 0, you can switch to a spotlight POV like you could a camera. So you can get a nice preview of what you're trying to do. Yeah, that looks ugly. I'm not going to do that. All right, how's everyone feeling? Should we have a few more minutes or are we ready to move on?
Nice. Yours looks real cool.
Oh, nice. I love what you've done with the shadow there.
I like the colored lights y'all put on here.
Yeah, and the colored lights on the end. It looks like a party. All right. So,
Animated,
yeah. Now, a few more things about lighting to cover. First is emissive materials. In cycles, if you have a material that has an emission value, it'll actually emit light into the scene. So if I click this cube and I go into the material editor, and down at the bottom, so we have our normal, we have our base color, we have our roughness, we have our metallic. Down here we have an emission. If we turn that up, the cube will start emitting light into the scene. And if we turn the emission strength up below that, we can see the cube becomes quite a bright light source and starts emitting a lot of light into the scene. A little bit too much, actually. Let me turn that back down.
So you just made a light from the sphere?
Yeah. So any 3D object can be a light. Now, that doesn't mean you should make every single light a 3D object. When cycles first came out, there was this craze of replacing all your area lights with emissive planes. But the problem is, since the render engine can't know it's a light, it can't optimize for that light. So your render times, if you make all your lights be physical objects, are going to be insanely higher than if you use real Blender lights. So it's good for practical lights. Say you have a scene with a lamp in it, and you want that lamp to actually emit light into the scene. Good, use that. Or if your character's, no, a flashlight would not be a good example. I would not use this for a flashlight. But if your character's holding, say, a lightsaber, and the lightsaber it lights up and lights up the scene, this would be a good use of that. And, but it can also slow down your scene a lot. When I was practicing for this, and I was trying to make this scene, I actually had a texture for the ceiling that had lights built into it, and I tried turning that way up, and my render time was insane. So I ended up turning that back down, kept it just at 1 for emission strength, and then put actual area lights underneath each one of those lights. And we're going to do that in a little bit. So let's turn our emission strength all the way back down, turn our emission off. There's one more thing I want to show you. So right now, we're working with lights within a closed environment, right? We have manually placed every light within our scene. But sometimes that's not ideal. Say you have an outdoor scene and your primary light is the sun. Well, yeah, you could add a directional lamp for that, but then you also have the sky and you have a million other different light sources that don't make a lot of sense to do manually. That's where HDRI lighting comes from. So
HDRI what?
HDRI, high dynamic range image lighting, comes from. So let's go back to Polyhaven. And you've already explored the textures and the models of Polyhaven. But you'll notice on the left, there's another category called HDRIs. So go ahead and click that, and I'm going to go out of render view because my laptop is chugging. Oh, that's why it's so slow. I'm connected to the Sling Studio network. And you'll get what?
That's just guess because the staff password is really complicated.
But go ahead and scroll through those and find a scene that you like. It can either be indoor or it can be outdoor. Outdoors are a little bit better of an example of what HDRI lighting can do. And on the left, there's a whole bunch of categories that you can choose from as well. So everyone give me a thumbs up once you found one you like. Great, you guys got that before me. I'm still choosing. I'll use this one, I guess.
So is this just like a panoramic image?
Yes, so what these are their 360 images. And you guys have worked with 360 video before, right?
Nah, not really.
So basically it's a panoramic image, like one you would take on your phone. Except they're special because they don't come as a JPEG or a PNG, they come as a .exr file. And .exr, what it says right here. And what that means is that they actually contain significantly more lighting information than just a standard image would. So, go ahead and, you know what? Let's use the 8K versions for now. Download the EXR file.
What? There's 22K?
Yeah, don't use the 22K one. That's not worth it. No, generally for me, if I'm just using it to create lighting, I'll use the 4K version. But then if I'm also going to use it as a background, like as a sky backdrop, I use the 8K version. In fact, all those images that I was showing you before with the roughness spheres, and they were the red spheres that were like going from not rough to rough at all, I rendered with this as a background and a provider for the lighting, this particular image.
Would I put this under textures?
Yeah, you put it under textures.
It's taking a while.
Yeah, because they're big files. In fact, here is let me find it. Here are all the blend file project folders that I was using in yesterday and the day before's presentations. And I actually made a common folder and then just referenced these two EXR files in all of the rest of these blend files because I didn't want to copy them, because that would be a horrible waste of space. Generally, I mean, that is breaking the project folder workflow, but I guess I just decided that this renders folder would be a project folder of itself with a bunch of sub-project folders. So just be wary if you're going to do something like that. Anyway, so has it finished downloading for everyone? All right. So go ahead and put it in your textures folder. And now, let's go ahead and go back to rendered view. I guess you guys never left rendered view. I left it to save on performance. And let's go back to the shading space, the workflow that the menu that we were using to test our shading, our materials. And go into rendered view as well in that mode. So click the shading workspace up here, and then click rendered view. No, not render, sorry. The shading workspace up here, and then the rendered mode up here. So now we've got access to our node editor, and this is what we were using yesterday to make our materials, right? So if we see we've got object here, if we select object and switch it to world, now we have the nodes, but these aren't the nodes for a material, these are the nodes for the background, right? So go ahead and we're going to Shift A, texture, and this time instead of an image texture, we're going to get an environment texture. This is really important. I once got stumped for a whole day why it wouldn't work because I had set it to image texture. So now we're going to open, and this is a new folder. This is a new file, so we're not actually in our project folder right now. Go ahead and navigate to your project folder, and then go ahead and find the EXR file you downloaded and open it.
We plug it in color to color.
Yeah, and now you plug it into the color, and you'll notice you get a nice, wonderful background. And if you disable your other lights, if you select them and then hit H to hide them.
Could we also just turn off the little
Yeah.
ball?
But make sure the ground is still enabled.
Ground. Where do I get that?
Well, it's the plane.
Did I do my plane? Oh, yeah.
You'll notice that your background is actually lighting up your scene. So let me quickly adjust the material of this so we can see it a tiny bit better. And this is basically the setup that I had when I was showcasing what the roughness and metallic maps do yesterday. I did a little bit more fancy stuff with like camera depth of field, which we'll get into later, but this is basically the setup I had. So that's how an HDR map works. And that's kind of it. I mean, if you want, you can also do things like add, say, a color, like a hue saturation to this, and now you're making your, it takes some time to update when you do that, but now you're making your environment look really weird. This actually looks really cool. I thought this would look really stupid, but it looks really cool. But you'll notice it didn't really change the sunlight much because the sunlight's too bright for this really to have much of an impact. And anything that you do, the most common use for HDRs actually is this value, because then you can adjust the brightness of the entire thing, and that will change, therefore, it'll have the effect of changing your camera's exposure. And let me just give a quick demonstration as to why we don't just use PNG files. So if I set this back to regular, you'll notice that our sun is clipping here. It's blown out, which makes sense because the camera's pointed into the sun. It's going to do that. The normal PNG file, that would just be it. But you'll notice what I can do here. If I turn down the strength of this background, you will begin to see that we actually get more detail, oh, not that far, where the sun is. And we can actually see that difference. Now we've got detail that was previously blown out in the frame. Because EXR, a successor to an older format called HDR, high dynamic range image. And that's why it's called a high dynamic range, because they're not just taking one picture. They're taking basically all the possible color data that there are. So if something's blown out, you can just turn down the brightness and you get it back.
So like one overexposed, underexposed?
Yeah, if it's over, you can't have something overexposed in an EXR file. And that's why we use them for lighting, because it allows the engine to be able to know, oh, that's brighter than this over here. Yeah. And therefore, that's how I know what the sun is and how I'm going to create that shadow. All right, is this making sense?
It's making sense.
I still can't.
Gotta let it sink in a bit more.
Yeah. And I've been trying to learn how to take HDRs for years, and I still can't figure it out because it's really hard.
What are the challenges?
Well, first of all, you have to get a 360 image, and if you don't have a 360 camera, that's kind of hard.
Yeah. Do you have to like take photos with different quadrants and stuff?
Generally, what you do is you have a DSLR on a tripod, and then you turn the tripod around, and then you do that. So you have to stitch that together, but also you have to take this photos at many different exposures so that you can actually get that brightness data.
Dang, so you really need a special camera.
No, you can do it with a regular DSLR. It's just hard. Okay. And you need special software, and sometimes they'll use a special tripod that can rotate it in like the right way. Mm-hmm. All right.
Hey, that's my favorite flag.
How did I not see this? All right, well, okay, so let's get back to our backgrounds file. So go ahead and save this if you want. Make sure you save it in your project folder because we referenced a file. And you can always do open recent to open the backrooms project as well. All right, so if we switch this into rendered mode, you'll see that it looks like garbage because we haven't actually set any of the lighting up yet. So first, we're going to want to switch this to cycles as well as we did the other one. So go back to your render properties up here, render engine, and then set it to cycles.
What is the difference between EV, Workbench, and Cycles?
So Workbench you don't have to worry about. It's for like ArcViz and stuff like that. It's technical. Also remember to set your device to GPU compute. I might have set it to do it automatically over there, but
I did it.
okay, cool. On my computer at home, I modified my settings so that it would do that automatically. I don't know why they don't do that by default.
Isn't your GPU more powerful than your CPU?
Yeah, that's why you want to set it to GPU. So Cycles is a path tracer. It does what I told you. It's going to simulate how light bounces around your scene. But you might have noticed when you were playing around with your lights, it's quite slow. Eevee, on the other hand, is a real-time rendering engine, like something you would see in Unreal Engine or Unity. And what it does is it uses rasterization to essentially fake it, except it can do it in real time. So it's a lot faster for the trade-off of being a lot less realistic. So you wouldn't get all the nice bounce lighting and stuff that we were seeing when we changed our plane color and then we saw that reflecting up onto the cube. You wouldn't get any of that. You'd have to use a whole bunch of other features and tricks that Eevee provides to make it do that. And that's a little bit beyond the scope of this class.
Okay. Could you work in Cycles and then go to, could you work in EV and then switch it over to Cycles?
Yes, you can work in Eevee and switch it over to Cycles, and that is something that we actually do a lot. I wouldn't want to do it in this circumstance because a lot of our lighting is going to be based off of bounce because we're doing an interior. But for exteriors, that actually works really well. You set up your lighting in Eevee where you can see what you're doing, and then you switch to Cycles to render. Because all the materials, except for when you get into more advanced material stuff, most of the time your materials that are set up for Eevee will work in Cycles, and your materials that are set up for Cycles will work in Eevee. So they're cross-compatible that way, which is nice. All right, so let's get started with setting this up, and I'm going to head back to Material View just so that we can work a little faster. And I will warn you, this is the part of the class where I fear my laptop might start chugging. And so you might have to just bear with me when that happens. So the first thing we need to do is add a roof, because we haven't added a roof. So go ahead and put your 3D cursor on top of one of the walls. And then Shift A, and then we're going to add a plane, and then scale that up to be the size of your scene. And I accidentally put it too high. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show you a trick. So here I've accidentally made my plane a little bit too high off the roof. So we were talking about grid snapping earlier, right? That's not the only type of snapping Blender has. If I click on this, I can change what I want to snap to. So I'm going to set it to snap to an edge. Or actually, I'll set it to snap to a face. Now if I turn on snapping, you'll see what it does is it starts snapping to the top of this face here. Now I'm going to lock it to the Z-axis so we don't get into any issues. And now my roof is nicely placed and it's precise. And I actually use that personally these days a lot more than I use grid snapping. All right, so we've got our roofs in place.
My snapping is not working.
Did you set it to face snapping?
Yeah.
Did you turn it on? Did you click the magnet to turn it on?
Oh, no. There we go. Oh. I feel like it's snapping.
Yeah, it's snapping.
I'm just gonna put it like that.
I'm not sure how well snapping works with the gizmos. You might want to try the keyboard shortcut.
Okay, which is
G, and then press the Z to lock it to the Z axis. Oh, I see what's happening. You're snapping it to the wall back there.
wait, which one?
Here, let me see. Oh wait, you just don't have it on.
Whoopsie.
Yeah, no, that's working.
Okay, cute.
So, try that.
I have a ceiling.
Great. And is it covering your entire mesh, or is there a hole?
There's a hole.
So just move it to fix that. You will probably want to turn off snapping before you do that. All right. So, one more thing before we start setting up our lighting, and remember that big rant I went on about, and I'm actually going to lower this a tiny bit because I just realized there's a bevel there. Remember that big rant I went on about face orientation and why you don't want to see the back face? Well, if we turn on face orientation now, and that's from this button and then face orientation, and then we look through the camera view, uh-oh, we have a problem. Because we added our plane, but the plane had no way of knowing which side we wanted to look at it. So of course it put the front face facing upwards. But that's a problem because we're actually looking at the bottom of this plane. So let's go into edit mode, select it, and then we're going to mesh, normals, flip. Mesh, normals, and then flip. You should probably turn on your normal preview so you can actually see what you're doing.
Okay, where is that?
So that was this button, and then face orientation. Except you're in wireframe mode right now. I don't think it works in wireframe mode. Oh, there we go. Yeah, okay, you already have it on. So yeah, mesh, you're in edit mode, right? You have the ceiling selected?
Yes.
So select the ceilings mesh, then mesh, normals, and flip. It's the menu bar.
Over here?
No, like the top menu bar up here.
Ah. Normals. Okay, mesh. Normals. Flip.
There we go. So now our ceiling's properly placed. We can turn off face orientation.
So face orientation is just saying like which way the object is facing.
Yeah.
That.
So every face, every polygon has a front side and a back side.
Okay.
Generally, you want to try to make sure only the front side is visible.
Which is what you were saying whenever you take out one of the faces and you can see inside.
Yeah.
That's when it's red. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes, like if you're doing more advanced stuff, it might be okay to show the back side, but in general, you want to make sure only the front side's visible. And here we had a problem where we could see the front, we could see the back side, but we couldn't see the front side, and we couldn't see so we just flip it around, and now we see the front side. So let's go ahead and add a texture to our ceiling. So I know Polyhaven has a bunch of really good ceiling textures, but you can look at wherever you want. Oh, maybe it's not on Polyhaven. No, it's on Ambient CG, never mind. Yeah, let's use the 4K version. JPEG. And if you need a reminder on how to actually import it, it's you select the material, and then in your shader editor, select the principled node, and then Control-Shift-T. So it's your material, it's your shading workspace up here. And remember to use the GL version of the normal map. And this one has both an emission and a metalness map, which the other ones we worked with don't. So we're actually going to have 5 textures we need to bring in, not 3. So you can do it manually, or remember you can click the principled node and then Control-Shift-T.
Oh yeah, let's see. How do I do that again? So this is the principal node, Control-Shift-T. And what does that stand for? What is that shortcut?
Well, Control-T is a shortcut for adding a texture, so Control-Shift-T adds more textures, I guess, because you're putting in more than one.
And which one of these? So I see there's a lot here. There's like...
Did you extract them?
Did I...
They're in your project folder, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to want normal GL, roughness, metalness, emission, and color.
Okay. That's cool. It just does it.
Yeah, it's really nice. And you'll notice that it comes in really big, so we can go into the UV editing workspace and select our UV tile and scale it up like this. So UV editing, when we're in edit mode, select the tile and then scale it up until we get a size that looks about right for the ceiling.
Is that UV maps?
No, just select the object.
Okay.
And then you'll see on the left here a UV tile, and you want to scale that up. Do you have your object selected?
I thought I did. Here, let's
Okay, you
see.
do.
So edit.
And then you need to select the face.
Which,
So go to the face selection
I
mode.
was doing not the face. Okay, so it is the face.
And then see that?
Yeah.
Click that and go into island selection mode there. So face selection.
This one?
Yeah, click this and then you scale it up.
Oh,
You
should
gotta
we
press.
Go back to, oh no, not that. Scale?
Yeah.
Alright, let's see. Wow, cool. That looks normal.
You managed to get your ceiling in?
Yeah, I'm just plugging it in a roughness, right? Color.
Yeah. You're gonna make a leather ceiling? Nice.
It's like a murderer's basement. I did something wrong.
Oh, you need to have this active. So you're going to go to the UV editing workspace, and then you're going to make sure your face is selected, and it will give you on the left here sort of a 2D face that you can select. So you got to be in edit mode. And then on the left here, you click that little square, the big square, no, the square in the left workspace. this,
Oh.
and then scale that up.
So are we going to want to put a plane light, like at each one of the...
We're going to want to put an area light at each one of those, but we'll get to that.
Okay, I'll be patient.
So let me know once you've got your ceiling at the size you like.
Oh, cool. I can see everything on the opposite side, too.
Yeah. Just word of warning, your thing is selected right now, meaning it's going to be slightly tinted, I think. Oh wait, no, you're in object mode, never mind, you're good. You don't want to do materials in edit mode because the edit mode UI tints the object, which makes it hard to judge what you're actually doing.
Oh, okay, I see.
I thought you were in edit mode for a second, that's why I brought that up. All right. Let me know when you're ready. All right, okay. So next, let's see what happens. So if we look through our camera and switch into rendered mode.
Won't it be dark?
It might. Let's see what happens. Why is your camera's looking at a wall?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, so it's shift with the other thing.
And it is dark because we have no lights. So first of all, you and I both have emission maps. Yours, I don't think does.
Is the emission maps the light?
The emission map is lighting. It's not gonna, we're not going to want to use it to light the scene, but it basically marks parts of the material as being lit up. For some reason, the Node Wrangler add-on can't detect it properly. So let's go ahead and move these down. So I moved the normal and then the normal map down.
Normal and then, okay, so like out of that block.
Yeah, well, not all the way out of the block, just make space. And then let's do Shift A. And you don't have an emission map in your texture, I don't think, so you're not going to be able to do this. But let's get another texture, get an image texture, and put it in that little space we made. And we are going to open our emission map that we just downloaded.
Emission.
And then we're going to plug the output from that into our emission channel of the principal node. It's right here.
There.
And you don't have to worry about this right now, Jabil. So now if we go into materials, you'll notice that these lights are significantly brighter already. And if we go back into rendered mode, they're actually beginning to light things up.
Cool.
So yeah, if you hit the rendered view now at the top right, now, it's tempting to go into your shading workspace and crank your emission strength up as a means for lighting up the scene. But as you can see, based on how long it's taken my computer to render it, that makes it take, well, a long time to render. It leads to your renders being very noisy. Your computer actually seems to be doing a fine job of it. Mine doesn't seem to be. So, how do we fix this? Well, we need to add actual lights to our scene. So let's bring our emission strength down to maybe 2 or 3. Something that's gonna blow it out in the frame properly, but it's not gonna depend on, it's not gonna light up the scene too much. I'll go 5 seems about good. And now, what we'll do is I'm gonna go back into the layout view here. Blender involves a lot of switching between views.
It's just like optimized for one thing.
Yeah. It's not like Premiere where you kind of stick in it the entire time. And let's go ahead and put our 3D cursor in the middle of one of these lights, and you can put it wherever you want because your texture doesn't have lights. And we're going to add a light, Shift A, light, and we're going to add an area light. And then we're going to, I would just move it down on the z-axis a tiny bit so it's slightly below the ceiling. Just by a tiny bit. And then scale it down so that it's the size of one of the lights in your ceiling texture.
Is there a reason why I can't see my light, or at least I don't see it good?
Well, they're always displayed as wireframes if you're not in rendered mode. And here's a time when it's helpful to go into orthographic view on the top.
Which is 7?
7. So you can so you can line it up with your light well. So now I want to talk a little bit about scene management. So do you think that's lined up well enough?
I think.
Oh, and you should do one of the lights that is the bottom left.
Oh, bottom left light? Okay.
Yeah. Or bottom right or top left or top right, just one of the corner lights.
All right, let's see here. What have I 7, shift new. Let's do bottom right.
Right.
You said slightly lower than.
Yeah, just by like a centimeter.
Okay, I think that's probably good.
So now I want to talk, before we start duplicating this light all over the place, I want to talk about scene management. So if we look at the outliner on the right, we can see every single object we have in our scene. Now, once we get 50 lights in here, it's going to start to get fairly cluttered. So let's go ahead and select the collection here, and then click the New Collection button up at the top right. And what that's going to do is essentially create a folder. So then you drag your light into that folder. Now when we duplicate it, all these lights will be stored within that folder, or collection as they're called. So here comes the fun part. Let's go to top view again. And we are going to hit not Shift D, this time, but Alt-D.
Before we do that, do we want to make sure that the light strength is a good place?
Here's the fun bit. When we hit Alt-D, it's going to create a light with all the settings linked, so that when we change one of them, they all change.
That's cool.
So we're going to hit Alt-D, and then press X to lock it to the X-axis. And we're going to move that onto the next light to the side.
And then same thing again.
And now select both of them so that we can speed up the process. Alt-D,
To select
X,
both of those, do we want
Shift.
to go select them in here?
or you can select them in the scene, whichever suits you.
I selected also the plane on top when I did
Oh,
that.
yeah, okay. What I had done is I had orbited around and select them from the bottom. But you can select them actually selecting from the outliner is probably easier. And you're going to keep doing that until you've got an entire row of lights filled.
What did I do?
All right, so let me know once you've done that. And for you, Jabril, it might be more helpful to move by discrete increments and like turn grid snapping on, so that you can keep it as a defined grid, because you don't have a texture to base it off of.
See, I feel like mine's hard because I can't actually see them.
Well, you can see the center of it, right?
Yes. Or I could earlier. I don't know where it went.
Oh yeah, it might be off screen.
Yeah.
Funny
I guess
feature
I should just zoom
Funny
out.
feature of Blender, if you're moving something and then your mouse goes off the screen, like to the right here,
That goes back, right?
it'll actually go back around to the other side.
Yeah. That's funky. Okay, yeah. And so that yellow line is supposed to be the center, or it's, because I'm guessing I want to be careful not to duplicate or have two lights right over one another,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's the center.
So
And
if
you might
I-
wanna zoom
So
in.
if I already did 4, I should probably put that like here.
I'm not actually sure. Here, let me see.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. I'm not sure why it's. Ooh, you've got your. You turned that off by accident, I think.
Let's see. What did I turn off?
You turned off viewport overlays.
Oh,
So,
silly David.
yeah, looks like you're missing 2. Let's just bring those back. And they don't need to be like, it's not rocket science. So now you can see all of them.
Okay, cool.
When you're moving them.
Sam, is there any way I can make the grid snapping like every 2 meters it snaps, or how would I
Well,
go
it's,
about
it's 1 meter by
it?
def. Oh, actually, because you're in orthographic view. So, because you're in orthographic view, it's a little different. You can probably just go into perspective view. Yeah, just go into perspective view, and then just take it from the side, I guess. And every snap is 1 meter.
Okay.
So just move it 2 snaps and it will be 2 meters. Hello, stream audience, if you can hear me, if Ben didn't mute my mic when I went off. You didn't mute my mic, did you?
Getting that tomorrow.
Oh.
This is why you mute the mic when Sam goes off camera.
Because it sounds like he's peeing.
No, because it sounds like a bottle
No.
clank the trash can.
So, Sam, I can't see my lights, so I'm hoping to see them above here, like I can see that
Yeah.
one there.
Yeah, you can only see the ones that are selected.
Alright, so if I go here and I select them all though,
Zoom in.
yep, I keep on thinking it's,
Okay, so the reason for this, and if you orbit around, you should be able
Yeah, I'll
to
orbit.
see. So the reason for this is because you have no lights.
what about all these?
I'm not sure, where did those go? Somehow these all ended up on the exact same spot.
Oh wow. Should I just command Z it until it goes back regular?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that happened. Did you try to use selection to cursor?
Maybe. I don't know what I did. Alright, let's see. Command Z.
Yeah, I don't know what you did. And we only have to do one row for now, and then we'll speed it up to the next row.
Because then once you have the first row, you can just duplicate that whole row and move it up, right?
Yeah, I guess I'll show you what I'm going to do for the next row. So once you have your first row, you select everything in that row. And then we'll just do an Alt-D, and this time I'll walk to the Y-axis. And I'll move the whole thing up there. So now I've got 2 rows. I Alt-D again, walk to the Y-axis. Now I've got 3 rows. And maybe I'll select the whole thing, and I'll Alt-D, walk to the Y-axis, and now I've got 6 rows. Yes, Ben?
Could you theoretically do that for the first row where you take the first light and then you lock it on the x-axis, Alt-D it to each of the other?
That's what we did.
Oh.
Let's fraction 2, Alt-D.
Oopsie.
All right. So when we reconvene at maybe 7:20, and hopefully you can get these lights done by then.
Try.
You scaled your texture very far down, so you have a lot of lights to do.
Yeah, I should have maybe not done that. But you know, we're learning.
What? Yeah, yours looks pretty good.
We just gotta try
You need any help?
No, let me figure. I'm getting it now. I just restarted
Yeah.
over.
I would zoom in a little bit because I noticed that that's a little bit inaccurate. You're not on the center. Yeah, so when you're in orthographic, you can just zoom in normally with the scroll wheel.
Okay, wait, where did that one go? Oh, it's that one? Yeah, that one's a little off.
Yeah, so I would actually zoom into the individual lights you're working on.
Okay. So So like such.
Yeah, and then just pan over when you want to work on the other ones. A little bit easier.
Here, let's see. So I'm gonna Alt-D. And I found that sometimes I'll click Alt-D and it's not actually duplicating.
Because you have to have your mouse over the viewport.
Ah, sneaky. Alright, so it's right here.
Yep.
Alright, yeah, these are a little off.
It's not rocket science.
Okay.
If one's very obviously off when you go to render, you can fix it then.
Now I want to shift, move over.
And here's actually where it's probably useful to use the mouse wrapping, because you're eventually, because you're moving at greater than the distance of the screen.
Alright, so Alt-D, X-axis. Oh, okay, yeah, it took it over to the next one. Alright. And I only have one more to do, so maybe I'll just go.
You probably don't even have to do that row, to be honest. It's not going to be on camera.
Okay, so then I would just select everything here.
Yeah. And do the same thing except with the y-axis and start going up.
Why did I do that? I keep thinking hold shift and then move it around like it's Photoshop, but it's not. Okay, so let's see.
And I see you've already moved on to rendering it. It looks good.
Why isn't it like emitting?
Well, that's why we use the ceiling texture that has lights in it.
Can you find
So here's the deal with lights in Blender. Lights are essentially, lights are invisible to the camera. So if you have a light in your scene and it's just like on camera and there's no mesh representation of it, it'll be emitting light without actually rendering in your frame. So you have to have some kind of light model. A common technique used is you'll have like a 3D model, like if you're trying to do like a photo shoot, a photo studio scene, you'll have a 3D model of an LED light, and then you'll have a Blender light in front of that. So right now you have all your lights, so you'll notice your scene is well lit, but you don't have any lights in the ceiling, any light models in the ceiling, so the light's just coming out of nowhere. So that's another important thing you got to think about when you're designing your scenes, is where is the light going to be coming from in this scene? Are you going to have a window which is letting all the light in? Are you going to have a bunch of lights in the ceiling like we have? Or is it like a portrait shot where you can just have lights off camera, which are lighting them like a studio? So that's something worth thinking about. We probably don't have time for you to go back and switch your ceiling texture out at this point. So
When I go home, remember you were talking about how you could make the cubes light up just a tiny bit?
yeah.
So would that be a fix?
Well, what we have is the ceiling texture that David and I are using. We have, it provides that light. It makes the ceiling light up. It doesn't light up, and as I was showing earlier, it doesn't, when you set it to light up a lot, it makes your scene really hard to render from a technical perspective. That's why we still use these lights. But if we are, you can still use that to make the actual texture itself look lit. So we're using that plus the lights. So if I go into my rendered view now, it's probably going to be too dark, but let's see what it does. We have light. And yeah, nope, I knew this was going to happen. I knew it was going to take forever to render because I'm doing this on a laptop. So, oh boy, isn't this fun?
What's yours doing? Oh, wow. Okay, so I think I have all my lights.
Great.
So now,
So I'm not going to demonstrate this part because, as you can see, my laptop seems to be refusing to render anything. But if you go into your rendered mode, you should be able to see that it is beginning to light up your scene. And your scene actually looks like it's lit now.
Yeah.
And this is taking way too long for this computer. So we have all started to notice the limitations of cycles rendering. And this is a limitation we're going to have to put up for in this class. If we do an advanced class, maybe we can start learning about Eevee and that render engine and how we can make it faster. But for now, know that your iteration workflow needs to be done in a way that is built around these long render times. So you need to, basically the way it works when you're rendering something like this is you set up your scene, and then you hit render, you see how it looks, then you go out of rendered view, you change a bunch of things, you hit render again, see how that looks. And it's this kind of the cycle of iteration. And and that's one of the big things in the CG community that render engines like Eevee were built to fix. And just like you, Jibril, were saying, a very common workflow is to use Eevee to make your scene and then switch over to cycles to render it, but we're not teaching Eevee in this class. And getting a scene like this to work in Eevee is going to be a lot harder, just because of all the required bounce lighting. So we have more or less a backrooms shot.
Yeah, that looks backrooms.
If I go ahead and hide this, if you click this button, by the way, that you've accidentally pressed a number of times, it will show and hide viewport overlays. So you can like disable all the annoying overlays and just get a look of how your shot looks. And if we go back to our reference photo, we can see we're actually looking pretty close now.
Their lights are a little stronger.
Yeah, well, that's something that we're going to cover just in a second. But yeah, that is one thing we can do. We can, because we used Alt-D with these lights, and I'm actually going to quickly set it up in Eevee so you can see kind of what it's doing in real time. Because we used Alt-D to set these up instead of Shift-D or Command-C, Command-V, if we change something about the lights, they all change. Which means that we can, as David said, we can make them brighter. And they're all going to get brighter. So if I go
And if we just do that to any one of them?
If we do that to any one of them, they will all change.
That's cool.
And now I'm back into the cycle of trying to render things on my laptop. Granted,
So here's where you would go like, all right, let's adjust it one time, see how it looks. All right, let's go back.
yeah,
Here, let's go back. Okay.
yeah. I mean, yeah, that's why I don't really make Blender scenes on my laptop. I do it on my desktop computer at home. That's what I made all the graphics that we used in the presentation yesterday on. And even then, a lot of it comes down to, okay, have a YouTube video up in another monitor so that when I hit render, I can entertain myself for the 2 minutes that it's going to take to actually finish. And that's why studios like Pixar have these massive render farms, just rooms of computers all dedicated to rendering this stuff.
Wow.
Because this is just one frame. Imagine what we need to do if we want to render a whole movie at 24 frames per second. You need a lot of rendering, therefore a lot of compute power, and therefore those massive render farms. So, how are we feeling?
Inspired.
All right. So there's still a few steps that we have to go to get to an image that looks like this. Because there's some stuff this image has that this image does not have. First of all, it's got the bloom around the lights. And it's got some additional model details that we're not going to do. So here's what I propose. I'm going to hit render over here, and I'm going to render with a... Let me show you... before I hit render, let me show you a few new camera tricks. So there's a few more settings you can adjust. And I'm gonna quickly set up an EV scene, even though I'm not teaching you how to do this, just so that I can actually show you what these do in a manner that's relatively like time saving. So let me just quickly set up some stuff to get EV working. Because EV does not use path tracing, you have to actually pre-calculate the light bounces. So that's what I'm setting up here. I'm setting up a way to pre-calculate how the light's gonna bounce around the scene. That looks about good. I might want to turn the resolution of this slightly up to maybe 6 and 6 on the X and Y. And let me just bake my indirect lighting. Not sure how long this is going to take. Yeah, it's thinking. You can see the progress down here.
So now you're using EV.
Yeah, I'm using EV just so I can demonstrate more camera settings without having to re-render every time. So I'd say this is a comparable shot now. Not as good as the cycles render, but I don't have to re-render it every time I want to change something. So if we select our camera, and you can actually do this if you go into Material Preview yourself, if you want to follow along. We've got a few settings. Go to our camera. The first one, and probably the funnest option, is we can enable depth of field. So we click that, and then we have two ways we can set our focal distance. We can either select an object to focus on by doing that, or if we come down here under viewport display and turn on limits, we now get this really nice thing where if we disable this, we can actually change our focal distance using a nice thing. Or if you really wanted, you could zoom in and get critical focus by adjusting this like you would a real camera. And actually, that's what I'm going to do. Let's get critical on the wall, I guess. And I seem to be having a lot of trouble doing that, actually. You know what? Easiest thing to do, just because my dumbass was adjusting the f-stop instead of adjusting the focal distance. That's why it didn't work. There we go. So now I can try to get critical on this wall here. But that's not really the way you're supposed to do it. The way you're supposed to do it is by selecting a focus object or turning on limits, and then you can actually see a little visualization of where you're focusing. So I can focus there, and then let me just crank down the f-stop so that we can actually see what that's doing.
F.1.
This is about the focal setup. This is about what I'd expect for f.1, to be honest. And that's what I did when I was creating another one of those things that you might not have noticed in the demos that I had, is I had the nice like out of focus backgrounds. That's how I did that. I just set up those spheres in the scene and then set up, and those were just, that was just the HDRI background, but then I turned on depth of field on the camera.
Like the monkey head.
Yeah. So what's a good f-stop to use, would you say?
You got 1.4.
I'm at 1.7 right now.
That's nice.
Cool. And then you can also set the number of blades the aperture has. And let me actually turn this back down to something unrealistic so we can see what this does. It doesn't do anything in Eevee. I forgot about that. Or does it? Oh, yes, it does. So you know how when a camera has something out of focus, it'll be like an octagon or a hexagon or however many blades the aperture has? we can actually change that here. So we can say, let's pretend we're taking this on a 6-bladed aperture, or say we're taking it on an 8-bladed aperture. Or we can turn it down to 0 and make it all perfect spheres. So that's kind of cool. And then finally, you can change the aspect ratio. So you can make it look like you're shooting like on an anamorphic lens with the nice bokeh that you would get on an anamorphic lens. So yeah, I'm going to leave this at 1 for now. And then let's not use this ridiculously low f-stop.
Even though it looks real cool.
And then finally, you can also enable composition guides down here. So you can get your thirds, and then you can get other stuff that's a little bit less obvious, like the golden ratio, all that jazz.
And that's all under your camera set.
Under viewport display, yeah, in camera settings. And you have to be looking through the camera in order to see it.
Alright, so let's see, 0. Okay. So well, I should have had a wall back there.
All right. And then finally, one last thing I want to go over before I start rendering, and you guys can keep playing with this, is if you go back to render properties here, and then you scroll all the way down to color management, you can set your exposure. And unlike in real life, exposure has no correlation to f-stop. So a higher exposure is not going to make your f-stop change, and a lower f-stop is not going to make your scene brighter. So you have complete control over your exposure separately from your f-stop, which is nice. And obviously not realistic, but it makes it for a better time. And then finally, I'm just going to go over this before I start rendering. Let's go over the render settings. So up here at the top, let me go back to cycles. Up here, so there's a few render settings I want to go over. So the first one is actually within the output properties, you can set your resolution. And it doesn't have to be 16:9. You can change what you want it to be. I actually use 1920 by 803 a lot because that's a anamorphic ratio.
Super wide.
Yeah. Or I use 1440 by 1080 because that's a 4:3. But I'll just keep it at 1920 by 1080 for now. You can set it to whatever you want. I'm not exactly sure what this is used for. And then you can set your frame rate that you're going to be animating in. We're not going to get to that till tomorrow. This can be ignored until we do animation. And then finally, you're going to set under sampling and render, you want to set your render samples. So remember how I hit render and it starts really grainy and then every few seconds it gets less grainy? That's because a sample has just come in. So a sample is every time it samples the scene with new light rays and makes it less grainy. For some scenes, you only need a very little amount of samples. For some scenes, you need a lot of samples.
Does that depend on like how many different objects, how many light sources?
It depends on how enclosed your scene is. We're going to want a lot of samples here because the light's going to be bouncing around all over the place because we're inside. I only used like maybe, I think I used 128 samples for all those renders talking about the material settings, because those were just, all that was in the scene was a sphere, and it got lighting from the HDR, hit the sphere, bounced to the camera, that's it. So your sample amount really is based on how much your light should be bouncing around within your scene. So it's kind of hard to say what your sample count should be until you start rendering, and then it'll be either not grainy and and then it will either be taking too long, or it will not, or it'll be too grainy. 4096 seems like a lot for this. We also have the noise threshold, which is a new feature. I've never really gotten that much of a hang of it. I'm going to turn that off for now so we can just use that. A good starting place is 512 samples. Generally, you want a power of 2, but you can get away with anything. And I'm going to hit render, okay? You don't have to yet because mine is going to take a lot longer than yours because I'm using my laptop. So we can either go to render up here and then click render image, or we can just hit F12. And that's going to open up a new window where it's going to begin rendering your scene. You always want to save before you render. Always hit Control S before you render, because out of all places in Blender where it crashes, rendering is one of the highest.
Yeah, I believe it.
All right. So I'm going to let this render. You guys should probably start rendering by the time I get to sample 256.
Basic question, going way back.
And other than that, let's call this a break.
Yeah, why can't I extrude this?
Because you don't have it selected, I think.
I thought I did. Let's go back here. Okay.
Also, you have the, yeah.
Right here. No, not that one, right? This
Yeah.
is what I want.
You want to disable that, probably.
Disable.
Here. So you're probably going to want to disable this,
Okay.
and then turn that on. So yeah,
Okay.
you didn't have it selected.
Okay, let's see. Extrusion. Alright, they select. 'Cause I need something.
So you should probably get at least a temporary rendering in now, because rendering is not actually the final step. We're going to do some more with the rendered footage.
Okay.
So even if it doesn't have the ceiling you want, you should probably render that.
Alright, so I now look through here. So this is, I just wanted something in the background.
Makes sense. Oh, yeah, and you need to redo your UVs. Look at that.
Oh yeah, back here because I added that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be going back to UV editing.
Yep.
And then on.
You select everything.
Oh yeah, so A.
Well,
Oh,
you've
wait.
got to have your mouse over here when you press A.
A.
And then just U, cube projection.
U, cube projection.
And then set your cube size to what you want it to be.
Maybe something like.
You probably want to, like, yeah, look at one of the walls as you do that.
That.
I set it to
That
2
looks
personally.
good. Okay, 2. I'll just do that. Alrighty, and then we're good.
Yeah, you're good now.
Alright, so back to layout. Okay, so that works now. So,
And remember to
here-
save.
Right.
Sorry, I get so on edge when people don't save after something.
Before that, will you remind me where I find my,
Don't change that. That's gonna.
oh, okay, whoops.
That's the editor type of this panel.
Where do I find the controls for camera stuff?
How to move the camera?
Yeah. Or not the camera, but changing the f-stop. and-
Oh yeah, so you got to select the camera first, so you can select the outline camera
Okay.
view there.
Did I do it?
No, you didn't. I don't know why. There we go. Now you did.
Okay.
And now it's the little film camera icon.
Okay, so I can change down here.
Got to enable depth of field before you can change your f-stop.
Depth of field. Okay, let's see. Something like that. Where is my... So I can put, I want my horsey in focus. I can change stuff. Rotation, ratio.
You're rendering a really low resolution right now.
Oh,
Unless you zoom down. Let me see. Oh, no, never mind. Huh.
oh, whoa. You can
How
do
low is it
fisheye
gonna be?
in this?
render times vary.
I mean, how long is the video going to be?
Oh, we're not going to do animation until tomorrow, but it will most likely be like 5 seconds maybe.
Oh, okay.
Alright, so I hit Control S to save. Now where do I go for render?
You can either go to render and then click the render image button, or you can press F12.
Let's see. That's not where my camera was.
The hell? Hold on.
Do I have two?
You might have two cameras. Let me see what's going on with that. Yeah, I gotta see what's going on with that.
Yeah, camera. What's the camera? One camera.
Was it? Wait, where's the corridor that it's rendering?
Back that way. You know, I think I may have been trying to animate my camera.
Oh, you know what? That's probably why.
There's a keyframe there.
There's a keyframe. So the camera's now facing to the right.
Okay, so.
So yeah, delete any keyframes before you hit render, or else, at least today, delete any keyframes before you hit render, or else it's going to be confusing.
So for that, I would just go down here and then just delete.
Yeah.
Boom. Okay, so now I can go like this, move around, figure out where I want to be.
How do you do that?
Magic.
Shift tilde,
Shift.
this button.
Okay. Oh, then you could play it. Yes.
And don't hold it, just press it. Oh, but you're still rendering right now, so it's... Oh wait, no you're not. Why is it
Is it
so...
done?
I don't know why it's so bad on your computer. You're getting a lot of lag.
Yeah, no, data is Windows.
Did you... What is going on? Why are you getting so much lag? Is there something... Okay, the entire program's lagging. What happened? Huh. And it's only happening when you look at it from the point of view of the camera. What happens if I disable depth of field and then... Okay. On Mac, enabling depth of field and having your preview on lags like hell, apparently. All right.
So is the render done?
You could hit render again. Your render is very dark, David.
Oh, I probably didn't do my exposure, huh?
Yeah.
It's extra creepy. Imagine if there was a shadow over there, though.
Did you put a light in there on purpose?
No. Oh, you know what? That's probably the original light.
Yeah, that's the original light that comes with your scene, probably.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, it's this thing.
Yeah. Hey, that if you put a little
Oh, wait,
shadowy
no,
figure,
it's
that'd
not.
be real cool, I bet.
Hold on. What is this light? Did you only...
Like Slender Man?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
you know what? I think you only duplicated your lights across half of the...
Whoops.
The map.
Okay. Well, could
Yeah,
I just
I'm s-
increase my exposure then?
I'm seeing what lights? Where's your lights? Collection 2. You've got all... How did you get all your lights in the same spot again?
I don't know. It's my superpower.
Here, you know what? You know the theory. Let me just do this for you
Alright, yes.
because it's... This is clearly not right.
Sam, can you walk us through what you're doing right here?
Well, I've walked through it 3 times already, but I'll do it again. Somehow, I'm not sure. You know what? Are you accidentally keyframing your lights?
Could be.
Did you play? Did
I
you?
accidentally maybe hit spacebar once or twice.
Well, spacebar just plays. You know what? This is what happened. you keyframed at one point your light to move across the scene.
Uh,
And if you move something without adding a keyframe and it's got keyframes, that movement doesn't apply.
okay.
So you keyframed your light to move, your original light, and then you duplicated the hell out of
So
it.
they all went over there.
So they all have your keyframe.
Okay, so just let it be part of the lesson of,
Yeah.
test as you go.
So let me just fix this. An area light. Let me just do that so I can see it. Oh, and I gotta put these in the lights folder.
Is it normal that it's not, that you're not catching that light on the edge?
I decided it's not going to be on camera, so like, why bother?
But it's 0%.
Is that always the trick?
Saying why bother the things that won't be on camera? Yes.
2%.
All right. So I put these all up there on purpose so I could see what I was doing. Now I'm going to move them back down. You've got 155 lights in total.
Woohoo! Only?
All right, now let's see what this looks like. All right, looking a lot better. I'm going to boost the power of these a little bit.
Have you ever watched the show? Like,
All right, now try giving it a render.
alright.
I redid the lights for you.
Let's go.
Now
I
you,
kind of did like
Yeah.
that all light sources
Yeah.
over there, super bright. That was creepy.
well, you could add a spotlight back there and then
Yeah.
go ahead and,
Or like a plane. I'd want to get a humanoid statue.
yeah, so what you could do is get like a humanoid model and then put a spotlight back there behind the humanoid model and make it cast a shadow onto the wall. Because when you're doing things in Blender, a lot of the time the trick is to think about, okay, how would you do it in real life? It's not, okay, I'm going to make this part of the scene brighter. It's, I'm going to put another light here to light up this part of the scene. It's not, I'm going to put this shadow on the wall. It's, I'm going to put this thing off camera to cast a shadow onto the wall.
That's
So let's go ahead and call it a break until this finishes rendering for me.
cool. Cool. Yeah, mine's rendering too. What's your percentage at?
71.
That's way faster than this one.
What? And you said it's a GPU?
Yeah.
Wow. MacBook.
Well, you've been rendering for the whole time I was helping David.
I feel
The
like
other one
his-
quit.
Yeah, his was
Oh.
only 5%, like a minute ago.
Oh.
Yeah.
Also, your scene's a lot bigger than his.
You have more
okay.
lights.
Yeah.
I guess simplicity is key.
Yeah, when you're trying to save time.
That was very weird.
What?
The Sling crashed. The Sling app just like crashed.
Oof. Yep.
And is it done?
All right, can you mute me?
Sam?
Yes, yours is done.
And it should be in my project folder.
Well, this isn't saved anywhere yet. This is just an image.
That
So,
makes sense. I closed it out.
and then put everything there.
Maybe you just have to go through my copy.
That makes sense.
Whenever we reconvene,
When this finishes,
which is
when that number on the left hits the number on the right.
so
And that says 512 out of 512.
so we're gonna break for the
Yeah.
foreseeable future.
Break until this finishes. Welcome to the land of waiting for things to render. You're going to deal with it a lot.
Render now.
0 viewers.
Many
So
recordings.
confused.
Really, these are not the people doing the fine.
Oh, that's.
Okay.
We also gotta teach you Magic the Gathering.
Yes.
That's the adult Yu-Gi-Oh.
Magic seems so fun. Said magic seems so fun.
Magic is fun.
I lost the render, David. That's the safe
Because
button.
you clicked out of it too soon.
Yeah, so I gotta do it again.
Well, good thing yours is faster.
Yeah, that's why they say you pay for your mistakes. I'm just paying with time.
What classes you taking this next semester?
This semester, I'm gonna take Principles of Acting, a drama class, so I can get my what is it called? The,
Film actors, guild stuff.
no, just the form that you have to do to be a pilot for drama, so they call them UAV.
Oh, yeah. You're
The
like
part-
FAA license.
Yeah, 106, the thing. So
Cool.
I'm just gonna take a class and not do it online because that stuff just seems very confusing.
I believe it. What kind of stuff do you have to cover in that?
Ooh, probably just how to read maps and stuff.
Mm.
I don't know, I didn't really look at the description. They're like, what you'll learn from this class, you'll get your Part 106 pilot license out the way, and that's all I needed to sign up for, and I was like, cool,
Nice.
thanks to teach me.
Hey, are you gonna be around? You want to act in my horror film?
Oh, when? Just when?
How about? Sunday the 4th, Sunday the 11th.
Sunday the 4th. And Sunday the 11th.
Oh, you're going all the way to 4096 samples. That's what appears to be taking a while.
Oh, wait, where do you see that? Oh. And that was that big number that you were saying you might not need all that.
Yeah. Though you're still kind of grainy, so you actually might want to keep going while we're here.
Okay. That's only 32%.
Well, at any time you can hit escape if you've decided, you know what, that's enough samples.
I see what it looks like now.
Yeah. But because we're still waiting on mine to look good, and yours is
Yeah,
still,
actually, wow, that's still, alright, I hit escape, but it didn't actually tick, so.
and now it
Oh,
takes a while.
can I just fix that?
Yeah. And if you go to rendering tab, you can actually get back. FYI.
Oh,
And then if you hit the little folder icon, you can save it somewhere.
okay, well, alright, I'll save
Polyhaven doesn't have any people,
Oh,
unfortunately.
Assets.
But Sketchfab should.
Sketchpad.
This one we need to make an account for, right?
I think so. I'm actually not sure if you need an account to download. I think you do though.
See, I keep on closing out the page, and I finally figured out where the save button is. So, it's my third time today.
If you close it out, you can actually get it back.
Oh, what?
Yeah, if you close this out, and if you go to the, why is this not responding?
I agree. Do I want to receive tips? What? Not available.
Do you already have an account?
Maybe. I wonder. Let's see if I can just sign in.
If you go to the rendering tab, here we go. And if you can't find it, if it's not here, you're like on something else, just click render result out here.
Thank you.
Oh my god.
Save. Oh, oh. Why is it black?
Do, 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 do. Assets.
Let's create image. Let's open
Is it here? Is it this blend file I want?
I think so.
I need any of this stuff. Should I still just have it?
Put it, yeah, drag it in.
Okay.
And then open it to make sure it works, remember?
So open
We
it.
have 3 instances of Blender open, by the way, right now. You probably want to close one of them.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. We'll close. We don't need that. We don't need that. Alright, we've got this creep. Yeah, that works.
And also make sure,
Oh, that's. Yeah, let me reopen it.
is that auto-converted or is that the original file?
I think it's the original file.
Okay, better.
Got this blend.
So, yeah, you're gonna want to full body traction.
Dang, that's all the stuff you need to cut something.
Yeah. Well, this does not look like it's actually originally a blend file. It looks like it was ripped and then imported from something. So, yeah, it should look a lot clearer than that most of the time. In any case,
Alright, well, let me try it out.
yeah.
Don't save. Okay, so I go back to layout. Get out of here. Alright, so if I want this lady.
When you're dealing with interiors, it's sometimes nicer to just do Shift tilde to move around.
Shift tilde, is that tilde?
Yeah, that's tilde. And you can just use WSD.
Ah, that is cool. Alright, so I want to put this creep over here. Alright, so I'm gonna put her right here. So to do that, I would then go shift tilde right up, click.
Hit click to.
Alright, so then I put
And when
this
you
here.
append things, it doesn't actually matter where the 3D cursor is.
Oh. So append.
direction. And this is why we looked inside. We know what we need to look for. I think it's full body. And I know you just put it into your lights filter.
So can I just drag
Just drag it out.
Where did she, oh, there she is.
So remember, you get the period to snap to where it is.
Okay.
And this is the importance of building to scale, because look, she actually looks like she's the right size.
Mm-hmm.
So now just go ahead and move her into a position of where you want her.
Alright, so let's see. Alright, I want that. That's too bad that she doesn't go right to where my
Well, you can also do Shift S selection cursor.
Shift S selection to cursor. Boom. Sweet.
And now you can hit periodic.
Yeah.
To get them to snap.
Okay, so I got her there. Now, if I put my this here, I can put a light, right?
Yep.
Here, I'm gonna probably want it maybe over here. Here, actually, let's do it right up here. We're gonna spot, so Shift A, light, spotlight. Okay, let me move over and look this direction. So for this, I can go like that. Not like that.
And it might be helpful to be in rendered view when you're manipulating the lights,
So here.
so you can see what you're actually doing. Or material preview. Here's another thing you can do. Do material preview, and then the down arrow, check scene world and scene lights.
That's cool. Alright, so let's see. Let's see. I'm gonna go over here.
Well, first of all, I noticed it's way too dim. You gotta make it a lot brighter.
Let's see this back.
Because you can't see what's pointed at her right now because...
That's too dim. Well, can I use this?
Yeah, but you might as well actually turn it up so you can see what the shadows are gonna look like.
Right, so I can go G2, right?
Yeah.
Alright.
And you can also, if you do Control 0,
Control.
Control 0.
Oh, whoa.
And you might want to do Alt-R to undo that weird rotation.
Alt.
Now you can do Shift tilde and move around with it like it's a camera.
And that's gonna control the light.
Yep.
What? That's cool. So I can go here. I need to go down. So actually, I want to go back up.
You probably want to turn your power way up so that you can see.
Something like that. Right?
Or not. Why won't? Can I take a look at that?
Yeah.
Why will this light not show up? What is our deal here?
I'm gonna change the color of that to red.
It's not even displaying onto the wall that's right behind it. That's another part of Blender is fixing weird technical issues like this that I'm sure if we start supporting, you're gonna get a million questions about.
Oh yeah.
So none of the lights are showing up. Why is that?
So must have gotten unchecked. Well, that one works.
But not in preview mode. Oh, now this light's working as well. Spotlight is, but not in preview mode. Why? What did you say your, what's your, what is your exposure set to? I don't understand. This
sometimes it'll just get screwy.
Yeah.
Okay, class play.
Okay, I am legit confused now. What happens if I move one of these down? That works.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between this light and this light? It's like far less powerful than this light. Okay, this is actually stuck to me.
Oh wow.
Pull up the chair. Happens if we could actually set our rendering to be. No. Wait, how many lights do you have?
Many.
Because I just realized there's a chance that there's a maximum amount of lights supported in EV. Because I noticed that half the lights over here are not emitting any light when you're in preview mode. So that could be it. We can do that. That's the part where Google comes in. Only 128 active lights can be in a scene at once.
And how many do we have?
500.
Oh wow.
256.
Okay. Well,
So
that explains.
yeah, luckily we're not rendering with EV, so we can go ahead and let's get this out of the there. So we can go ahead and just try to set this up to be a good angle. Something doesn't feel right about this rendering, right? Ooh, oh, damn it. This computer should support optics. We really should have that enabled. Maybe we should turn down all the other lights so that this light's a little bit more prominent.
Yeah.
And this is basically the workflow of creating a blender scene. Screwing around with it like this until you can get it to work. Maybe it's also useful to hide the ceiling. Sometimes hiding things like, okay, yeah, that's
Now
it.
it's showing.
Yeah, so sometimes hiding things in your scene while you're working on it, especially things that might cause a lot of render time delay, can be useful.
So I can already see, I think we want to bring that spotlight down.
Yeah, well, I set it to like 1 million because I was trying to figure out why it wasn't showing.
Oh, I meant like distance wise. I kind of liked how bright it was. One billion watts.
I think that's 1,000 now. And then also, and you know what we can probably do? Let's hide all these lights and then show them again. And that will hopefully force Evie to reevaluate which lights get priority. Oh, this is still in the lights category. There we go.
Nice.
Wait, did you put Wanda in a?
That's not one of the Maximoff, no.
I mean, she's wearing a pink leotard.
It's just bikini lady.
David.
Alright, that was the first one that came up.
Blender.
Alright, let's make the light red.
Letter red? Okay, 90.
What are you doing?
I hit the lights by pressing.
What is this?
Okay.
And then you can do all these and hide everything else.
Who's digging?
Me.
13 with 500 individual lights. That's gonna result in not happy things happening.
Like this. It's okay that the audio is still off. No, it's still off. How much is the first one eating that was?
Expensive, $10 for 2 slices.
2 slices? Damn. That is expensive.
Alright, so say I wanted to go back to
Oh, Alt-H hides everything.
Alt H. Okay, what about my camera?
We'll just hit 0. Oh wait, it's still set to the light. Yeah, select your camera in the outliner, and then Control 0. Control 0 sets your active camera, whichever camera you have selected.
Okay. So now I should look at this, right? And that'll tell me the real. See if our experiment actually worked.
I can see a little bit of bread coming in there. Here, I'm gonna help you out and just get rid of all the lights that are not on camera.
Okay.
Because they seem to be causing a lot of problems.
Yeah. So pretty much like everything
So, yeah.
in that area.
Our camera's here, right? And then
Yeah.
it's looking down a corridor that goes to here. So. And then let's show our walls as well. Oh, we need name walls. Yeah, of course. Do that. So we're gonna get rid of these. Get rid of these. These can be seen, but these can't. So we get these. Oh,
Ooh, my wall.
let's make that not selectable for now.
How'd you do that? Oh, the clicky button.
And where's the actual camera? Alright, so we can get rid of everything over here. Because that can't be seen either. Actually, yeah. And then also everything over here. And that brought our number of lights down to 85.
Way better.
Yeah. So,
So we're like 50% less processing power.
yeah, now we can actually see our red light over here.
Cool.
And we also know that now we need to turn it up because,
Yeah, it's not that bright. Also, maybe I need to bring it back up because we're barely seeing any shadow.
yeah,
Okay,
so.
I'll play around with it. Thanks, Sam.
There's a man sitting out on our front steps.
Well,
So to get a sharper shadow, you're probably gonna wanna turn your radius down significantly.
oh yeah.
And also not make it halfway in the ceiling.
That's totally Wanda. I mean, she's emitting a red light.
Alright, so how do I, let's see, let's go back over there.
Still patching holes.
No, not really.
Period.
Feels weird.
With the mouse over there.
So you can
Bounce. Okay, so light not in the ceiling. Let's go down, light over slightly.
Oh, shoot. I should put my earphones in here. Charge. But yeah, your thing's almost done. I know you yes. So we can get this going again. Like,
Yeah.
oh, like 5 minutes or something.
Something like that. Ooh, creepy. That is spooky.
And you might even want to turn either the main lights down or that light on.
Okay, yeah, let's turn our main, or what if I turn my camera exposure down?
Well, that's going to turn both of the lights down. The reason I was saying that is because you can't see the shadow.
Okay, yeah, so we're gonna go lights and go,
Power.
yeah, maybe down, yeah, like that. 15. So let's see, now if I select my camera and hit,
Mouse has to be over.
oh yeah. No,
Got to control 0 to make sure you're going to the right camera.
control 0. No, not great, okay. And that's why we play around with it.
Yeah. See, just as I was saying, a lot of it is a game of geometry and knowing what you can get away with from a geometric perspective and what you can't.
Well, where am I? What craziness is happening?
I should have known this would not be a good idea to try to run this scene.
Well, how much more do you have to teach?
Enough that, okay, you know what? Let's call this scene rendered for now. We'll
Okay.
move on.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So everyone render your scenes.
Alright. So save first,
Yes.
then F12.
Yes.
Something's going crazy. Why is it looking there?
Because I think you don't have your active camera set correctly.
Okay, so camera.
Yeah, nope, control 0.
Okay. So now render that?
Yeah.
Alright, F12. Okay, I'm ready to
All right,
see your.
and do you have yours rendering as well? All right, cool. So let's get those rendered. And you don't need to render, you're still trying to render 4,000 samples.
Okay, how do I turn that down?
What you need to do is you need to come over here and, oh, you turned it down on the viewport instead of the render.
So here.
1024 is probably good for your scene. You've got a lot of dynamic lighting, so you're going to want more samples.
Okay, F12. That one looks real good.
What?
That one looks good.
Hell, it's all about the composition, right? Just like in real life, you gotta make sure you got good composition with your frame.
Yeah, mine's got a lot of negative space.
Buffers. That's the other jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it's fun because if you play it, they go like open a little bit and like shut.
All right.
Did you just finish it?
Mine is finally finished rendering. So, let me save this because I don't want to lose this. Let's talk about post-processing. So I'm going to keep this brief because we're running a little late. Let me just save this. You know what, I'm going to save it as an EXR as well, just in case I want to come back to post-processing without re-rendering it. If you ever want to save the raw render data, save it as an OpenEXR file.
And what does that do?
It basically saves, instead of compressing it into a PNG image, it saves all the render data that actually gets rendered when you're creating your scene. So let's talk about compositing. Let's go over to the compositing workspace. And then click Use Nodes. And what that's going to do is it's going to open up something a lot like the material editor, except it's working just with your image. So compositing.
Let me stop this.
Oh, is it still rendering?
Yeah.
Just hit escape.
Escape.
And then go to compositing and then use nodes. Click use nodes at the top. So we have Node Wrangler enabled, right? So if we do Control Shift click on something, we get a nice preview of what that node looks like in the back. Right? And we don't really need the timeline, so I'm going to throw it down there. There's a number of stuff we can do, and if you've ever used any kind of compositing software, like Nuke or anything like that, or DaVinci Resolve, it works exactly like that.
What does compositing mean?
It means taking your output image, your raw file, and then turning it into something that actually looks pretty beautiful. If we go back to my examples here, let me pull up the examples I was using. One second.
So is Blender going to let you modify the final image
Yes.
rendered?
Blender will let you modify the final image after you render it. So we take a look at this image. This is an image I created a few months ago. We've got the base render, right? But we've also got all this like nice raindrops on the lens and this bloom from the rain and all that stuff, and that all comes in compositing. So I'm going to go over the very basics of compositing, and like the material editor, you can explore more with it if you so choose. But just like the image, what am I saying? Yeah, just like in materials, you can Shift A, add a bunch of nodes. There's a lot of the nodes are the same, but also a lot of nodes are different. And I can say add a color correction node. You know what? That sucks. I'm not going to use a color correction node. I meant a color balance node. And look at this. You've ever used Lumetri Color in Premiere, you know exactly what this does. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe, oh, and in order to see it, I got to make my viewer also come out of here. So let's find a good beige like this. That I think works well for me. Or I could do that. Actually, you know what? This actually looks kind of nicer. It looks almost creepier. Making it more purple in the base.
What did you do to get a node?
Shift A,
Oh, Shift A to Control A.
and then just go ahead, and then there's one node that I always use pretty much because it's really nice. Or two nodes actually, so I want to show you those. There is the I forget where it is. There is under filter, glare, and I put that in, and I get this. And I like to set it to fog glow, and then I'll maybe turn up the size a tiny bit. So now these lights look like they're actually starting to illuminate the scene, like they're getting a little lens flare. Take that out, they don't look as realistic. And then the other one I love to use, and too many Blender artists love to use, it's under distort. There is lens distortion, which allows you to do cool lens effects like this. Okay, that's taking it a little bit overboard, but you get what I was going for.
That's cool.
So are you modifying the original attributes of the model?
No.
Or are you just overlaying effects onto the image?
I'm basically, you could take the rendered image and put it into Photoshop and get similar results. I'm modifying the rendered image. Granted,
It's just like showing what Blender.
yeah, what Blender can do. And Blender actually has access to more color data than something like Photoshop would, because it does this before its color space transforms.
So if you want to do, could you technically do a full post-production process in Blender, editing, sound?
Yes, you can do your full post-production process in Blender. And you know what? And then also, one thing that can be very helpful sometimes, I'm actually going to lift up our blacks a little. No, that looks awful. It's a tiny bit brighter. And I'm going to go ahead and throw up the reference image if you guys want to get a sense. And you can't, unfortunately, do that VHS effect in Blender.
It's probably like a filter or something that they put over it.
Yeah. Well, the original Backrooms video, what the guy did, and this was really clever, was he made it take place in the 90s. So he could justify shooting on a VHS camera and then put a VHS filter over the entire thing to cover up all the flaws in his CGI.
Nice. That is smart.
And later on in the series, when people actually start venturing into the Backrooms, they all wear hazmat suits
Cool.
so that he doesn't have to make CGI humans.
That's funny. Alright, so image, I need to connect to my image and then to the viewer. Oh, wow. What did you use for the fog lamp thing?
The glow node.
Glow filter.
It's under filters.
Sure it's not glare.
No, sorry, glare. That's what it is. Sorry.
Gucci. Oh, that's cool.
would you say David and Jabril are now officially VFX artists?
Yeah.
I would not say that as the person being talked about. Man, this is such a, yes, this has given me a greater understanding of Blender, but it has also shown me just how much I don't know about the program. But like Sam said, I think it's just getting your hands dirty in there and like playing around with stuff.
I'm setting up something for in just a second.
Is this a Blender film?
Yeah, and I'm gonna show it at the end here.
See it?
All right. Whenever you guys are done, just let me know. All right. And then here's how you save it. So
I want to see it.
finally, we need to save this to an image. Now, normally you're supposed to just be able to save this again, but for some reason, Blender's, you can't do that unless you re-render, which makes no sense. So I'm gonna just, as a little workaround here in the rendering view, switch this to viewer node. And that will get you the version that has all the nice compositing. Yeah, it should be in there. Just look for it.
Oh, it goes down.
And then Alt S, or click the save button, and then I call it final.png or something. And
Mine went to a weird pick.
okay, yeah. You are still in that thing. You just need to. Oh wait, go to compositing again.
Composite.
You don't have your viewer node connected to anything. Oh wait,
I
actually,
was messing with the horse.
you. Looks like you have got to re-render because you were messing with something.
I was messing with lots of things.
Yeah, no, you got to re-render.
Oh well.
So, yeah.
You know,
you
I'll
can-
just we'll do.
Yeah, do that
let's
later.
move on.
And that is how you go from an idea to a finished image.
The looking image.
So, that's basically it for today. Obviously, you can play around with the compositor a lot more, get a lot better looking stuff. There's a lot that you could play around with a lot more and get a lot of better looking stuff. Just looking at this image, I can already see a million things I would change. But that is always the case. Even your best renders are going to look at them and say, this is crap, I want to change things. But ultimately, art is never finished, or art is never complete. It is just released. So, personally, I would want a little bit more uniqueness to this scene before I uploaded it. But that's just because I hold myself to a really high standard. But yeah, that's it. So, just to give you a little taste of where you can go from here, I have pulled up a short film that was made entirely in Blender, including the compositing, and I'm gonna play it for you. If I can make sure that my audio output is set to the right device. To this scene before I uploaded it, but that's just because I hold myself to a really high standard. What the hell? But yeah, that's it. So,
I think you turned that audio down.
yeah. God, I'm underexposed.
We can fix that.
Well, we're done. We don't need to fix that now.
Okay.
It just got too dark, that's why.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you turn the ISO
So
up.
after we
Sorry?
That's when you turn the ISO
Yeah.
up.
I thought you wanted to keep it at 800.
I wanted to keep it at 800 while we were still, where there was enough light to keep it at 800. I didn't want to put the aperture down and then turn the ISO up. But when the aperture's all the way open and the shutter speed's where it is, you turn the ISO up. All right, anyway.
That's impressive that that was all. I don't dare to choose any of us little guys.
Everyone, a round of applause for Sam.
So that's basically the minimum viable product when it comes to Blender. There's a lot more you can look into. Like tomorrow, we're going to be doing animation, which is technically optional if like you just want to be doing posters and stuff. But it's definitely good to learn basic animation and how to like export a video and stuff.
Well, I'll be tuning in for that one. I not make it in.
Right.
Sorry.
But yeah.
That looks like one of Hitman 3's maps.
Makes sense.
I'm gonna save this.
Oh, I was just about to close it without saving.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that, Gabriel. In fact, why don't you take the computer and toss it? Oh, that should do the trick.
I should save it?
Yeah.
No, that's
You
just
want
like,
to end the life?
no.
Sam,
What?
we're going to end the life.
Yeah.